We're here today with Derek Earle, who is the city engineer for the city of Scottsdale. Thank you very, very much for joining us. And just to let you know, I'm speaking today on behalf of the Associated General Contractors and the ACEC. This webcast will be going to both of our respective members for information that is important and pertinent to our industry. So thank you very, very much for joining us. Give us a little bit of overview of the CIP program, the next 5 years, or what the future holds for the CIP program.
Well, Scottsdale's had a pretty aggressive capital improvement program over the years. Right now we're looking at nearly $200 million in expenditures this year. Over the next 5 years that starts dropping. It starts dropping to a level of only about $80 million in 5 years. And a lot of that really is related to the funding sources that the city has. Previously we had a bond program. That program is running down. Another part of the capital improvement program is funded with the general fund, and as we know, most cities and towns are struggling a bit with their budgets today. So a lot of our funding is really decreasing, but the bond program is over a large variety of projects, water resources, parks and libraries, police and fire, transportation, to name a few.
Excellent. The previous bond program that was passed in 2000, give us an overview of that, what's happening with that, and then we'll talk about what the future holds for either the next program, or if there is a next program, what the voters are going to have to choose this year.
What we call it Bond 2000 was a $358 million bond program and passed in 2000 by the voters. You can imagine $358 million 10 years ago was a significant bond program. It covered roughly 40 some odd projects around the city. It was across a variety of questions: parks and libraries, some transportation projects, some stormwater improvements. And we have been working on that program for the last 10 years. When it was originally passed, it was intended to be a 5-year program, and it took us 10 years to build it. We've been through some financial up and down times in the last 10 years. As we sit today, the last $50 million was issued of that bond program was issued at the early part of this year. Most of the projects are either in design or have been built at this point in time. So we're really closing down the program. We probably have about another year or two of expenditures to close out the Bond 2000 program.
You mentioned general fund, and you mentioned some of this bonding revenue. What other kind of revenue sources pay for the CIP program?
Well, there's a broad range. One of the programs, as I mentioned, on the general fund, what we used to call pay-as-you-go, that when times were great over the last 10 years, the city of Scottsdale would take excess funding from the general fund and put it in the capital improvement program. In a couple of years, that actually totaled almost $150 million. Wow. When we look at it today, we've got less than $1 million, or about $1.5 million per year that'll go into the bond program, or into this capital improvement program from the general fund. The other sources are what we call enterprise funds. For example, under water resources, where we have fees for water, et cetera. Those go into back to water resources and are used for construction projects. Solid waste also has enterprise funds. Plus, we also get funds from grants from the federal government, the ARRA funding, which we had quite a bit of, has now run out, but that's one of the sources. FHWA, FTA, all the federal agencies. Also other agencies like Flood Control District, Maricopa Association of Governments, Prop 400 funds. So we've got a variety of sources that go in to fund our capital improvement program.
So my suspicion is the financiers and the folks got together and said, okay, this program is contracting, right, and we need to do something to sustain it into the future. Tell us about that process and what happened that gets us to November, which I guess we're going to the citizens of Scottsdale are going to be making a decision on continuing some sort of a bond program. Explain that process, and then let's talk about the current bond program that's up for vote, I guess, in November.
Okay. Well, we started almost a little over a year ago. City staff got together, looked at the current capital improvement program, realized we're starting to run short on funding. But we have significant capital needs for the city that continue to have to be addressed. So we met, we put out a call for projects, and at the same time we were working with City Council, and they also in their budget deliberations last year suggested we look at a bond program. So staff went out, did a call for projects internally on capital needs for the city. we came up with nearly $1 billion in projects that were in need around the city. Looking back on the process, there's wants and needs, and then there's also would like to haves, nice to haves, new buildings and things like that. But it was over $1 billion. Staff took that list and started vetting it down to more and more critical projects. At one point, we had it down to around $250 million. And then we began our presentations with the City Council and began presentations with boards and commissions. Clearly, it's an important public process for us to go through all of these organizations. We got through the City Council. They sent us back several times to reduce the amount and to try to get us to the most critical projects that the city needs. And finally, I believe it was in June, the city authorized us to go to a bond election and approve the election. So it was a process of multiple council meetings, boards and commissions, and really a public outreach project for the city.
So what's the total program for the next 5 years?
Well, the planned bond program is $36.6 million. There were actually two questions, and I'm going to focus on primarily the first question. There was another $27 million question, which is a financial, basically a refinancing of some existing obligations. So I really won't focus on that, but I'll focus on the $36.6 million program that the city is focused on. And actually, we believe that may be about 2 years worth of projects for the city. We believe we'll have to go out for another bond issuance fairly soon. Changing our philosophy of going once every 10 years, which in essence we did before, trying to get a little bit more regular in working with the voters on critical needs for the city.
So what does it mean to the city of Scottsdale? What do these facilities mean? What do they do? What's the actual good that it brings to the citizens of Scottsdale?
Well, I think the most striking thing about the bond program, and I think that the thing that council was most excited about, is when we really vetted down the projects to about $36.6 million of potential projects, we also looked at the amount of matching funding that we can get, both all through MAG Prop 400, Flood Control District, all the various agencies that I mentioned earlier. We are looking for a $36.6 million program at nearly $130 million of matching funds. So in really kind of an informal way, we look at it as a $160 million bond program, of which the taxpayers are really only having to come up with $36 million.